joining us. Again, welcome to Marijuana's Impact on Youth, a free webinar from DrugFreeAZKids.org. We are a program of Southwest Behavioral and Health Services, and that's something new. So if you haven't joined us on a webinar in a couple months, that may be new to you. But as part of the Southwest Behavioral and Health Services team, we're really looking forward to increasing the impact of our messaging and joining forces with a great organization and a great team there. This project is funded through the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family and the Arizona Parents Commission on Drug Prevention and Education. And this is not the only program that's funded through that, through those groups. We actually are able to do one-time presentations and active parenting workshops, as well as different health and safety fairs, and a variety of other material distribution points that we're able to do because of those funding sources. And we greatly appreciate the support from the Governor's Office and the Parents Commission, which lets us bring these webinars to you free of charge. All right, a little bit about myself. My name, again, is Justin McBride. I'm a program manager here at Drug Free AZ Kids, and I am an Arizona native, born and raised here. Went out of the state for a little while when I joined the Marine Corps and was overseas for a bit. I also lived in California for a little while before coming back to Arizona, where my roots are. And prevention really is a passion of mine, and helping to empower young people or people who work with young people in a way that they can develop into responsible, drug-free citizens and show us what their true potential really is. If you guys have any questions throughout today's webinar, feel free to let me know in the chat box. You can use it. It should be in the bottom left-hand or right-hand corner of your screen. All you have to do is type in there, and that will share it with the whole room, and I'll be able to see it as well. If you are viewing us on a mobile device, you might have to select, there's a little menu button, and then you can go to the separate chat screen as well. So if you guys didn't know that, you can view these on almost any mobile device that you'd like. Just go to clickwebinar.com and you can download, it'll take you to the link to download that onto your device. Okay, so let's get started. What everybody's here for today, learning about marijuana's impact on youth. Today it's 420, so we all most likely know what 420 is. There's various names. It could be National Pot Day or Smoke Pot Day, Weed Day, Marijuana Celebration, Recognition Day. There's so many names. Essentially, today is all about marijuana for a number of groups out there. But within the past couple of years, here in the prevention world, where we aim to prevent youth substance abuse, including alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, other illicit drugs, we want to turn that around and not just use this as a day where people celebrate marijuana, but where people learn about marijuana and what the facts are. So today we're going to talk about what's being said, what are those facts, and what can we do to make an impact on the lives of young people. So what is being said? Well, before we get into what's being said, I want to take a look at perception. And if you joined us on our last webinar, or I think it was a couple months ago actually, we talked about why kids use drugs, why kids abuse drugs, or engage in risky behavior for that matter. And it comes down to perception of risk and perception of social approval. There are positive risks and negative risks, but for the purposes right now, I'm just referring to negative risks. That could be to your health and a variety of other things, but just negative risks in general. And then social approval. The reason this says perception of risk and perception of social approval is because what is socially approved and what is actually a negative risk could vary for some people, especially when it relates to young people. Perception of risk and the reality of what risks are going to be two different things many times when it comes to a young person. And that's because their brain is still developing, and there's still this prefrontal cortex up here that's still developing. It actually isn't done developing until around the age of 25 on average. And that controls things like morality, sound decision making, empathy, controlling emotions or regulating emotions, I should say. So it controls a number of things, and that's not fully developed yet. So perception of risk can be very different than the reality of risk. Same is also true for perception of social approval. When it comes to young people, they're and adults in general, but everyone, I guess, but especially with young people, our perception of what socially approved really has to do a lot with who we're surrounding ourselves with, the messages we're surrounding ourselves with. So with teens, that may be a little bit more focused. They may not interact with as many people as we do as adults. They're going to tend to interact with people that are in their communities, in their schools, in their neighborhood, and not really see the bigger picture, I guess, of what's socially accepted and what's socially unaccepted. So the perception and what's really socially accepted and not could vary. Um, so that's perception. Perception of risk, perception of social approval. Now, what are we talking about? Where do these perceptions, what impacts this perception? Well, this is impacted from a number of sources. It could be from media, TV, radio, could be have to do with their friends, things that they see at home, things that they see on the street, things that they see at school, anywhere. The policies that are established as part of maybe their school, as part of their local government, state government, federal government, all of these different things impact the perception that something may be socially accepted, and the perception that something may have negative risks associated with it. And the reason that these two things, perception of risk and social approval, are really important is because these two things go hand in hand when a teen decides whether it's front of mind or back of mind subconsciously to engage in a certain behavior. This chart here shows the perception of risk and perception of social approval and how they really relate to one another. As the perception of risk increases and the perception of social acceptance decreases, that would be there at the bottom left-hand corner of the chart. Somebody's going to be less likely to engage in a behavior. Pretty much, they don't think it's going to harm them, they think it's going to harm them, and they think that society doesn't accept that type of behavior. So someone's going to be a lot less likely to engage in a behavior because of those two things. Now, when we look at the opposite end, at the top right corner, when a teen perceives something to be socially accepted much more, and they perceive it to be much less risky, they're going to be more likely to engage in that behavior. And this is just a simple way to think about influence. The influences that, all the influences for a young person. So while we may be part of that influence, there's many other influences that I just mentioned as well. And this applies to really any behavior, perception of risk and perception of social approval, and how a young person may decide consciously or subconsciously to engage in that behavior. Now, why is this important? Well, let's look at marijuana. Let's think about that. Where marijuana is right now. Over the past decade, we've seen a huge shift in the perception of social approval. And that's with the changes in certain policies or the lack of enforcement of some policies by different levels of government, which has made marijuana seem more socially accepted as a whole. Also with this, and with marijuana being referred to as medicinal marijuana, even though it hasn't gone through the same trials that other medicines really go through with the FDA and other agencies, it's still perceived as less risky because, hey, it's medicine. That's what a lot of young people think. It's medicine, less risky. So because of that, we have seen a shift from marijuana over the last couple of decades from the top right-hand corner of this chart down towards the bottom left-hand side because it's perceived to be less risky and more socially accepted. Now, let's think about another substance just for a second. Think about tobacco and cigarettes. What's happened over the past couple decades? The exact opposite has happened. Maybe 30 years ago, cigarettes were pretty accepted. Most people smoked, um, and it was kind of accepted. You could smoke in restaurants, you could smoke in bars, you could smoke in tons of places. You go back far enough, you were smoking in airplanes and in the business place, all over. And it was perceived to be less risky because, hey, it helps you deal with stress, and there's all these other benefits associated with it. And why would it be legal if we couldn't? So it really wasn't that. It wasn't perceived to be that risky, and it was perceived to be socially accepted. Over the past couple decades, that's really shifted. And we can see what happens as policy changes go into place. We can see what happens as social acceptance decreases and less people are smoking, less teens are smoking and using tobacco in general. So you can really see how that can impact people using or engaging in a certain behavior right there. So that being said, now that we have a kind of a refresher on why teens may use, let's look at what people are saying about marijuana. Uh, People are saying it's safe through the tone of voice that newscasters may use when they talk about marijuana. They're not talking about it in a serious way anymore. It's really like, oh, today's National Pot Day. It's 420, rather than having a seriousness behind that tone of voice when they're talking about other substances, talking about statistics relating to tobacco-related deaths and synthetic drugs and prescription drugs, when there's a much more serious tone. And then now talking about marijuana, there's kind of like a giggle. You see it all over. The message this is sending is it's safe. It's not really that big of a deal. It's non-addictive. People say that all the time. Not addictive. It's not really a drug. There is no long-term impact. It's natural. It's herbal. It's a cure-all drug. It expands the mind, right? And with all of these different messages that are out there, this is what teens are hearing. It's not a big deal. So whether or not that's reality or not reality, teens are hearing that marijuana is really not a big deal. It's not an issue. And that's just not the case. When it comes to marijuana in young people, this is a serious issue. And it can have a serious impact on the lives of young people. So let's take a look at some of those facts. And while I'm switching gears, again, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box, and I will get to them as soon as I can. If I can't get to them right away, I'll definitely make sure to get to those at the end of the webinar. So you can make sure, if you include those in there, we'll definitely get to them. So what are the facts? What are the facts associated with marijuana and young people? Well, let's take a look at a couple different ways that that marijuana is abused. You have what most people are familiar with. On the top left, a joint, aka marijuana cigarette, marijuana wrapped in some type of rolling paper and smoked. You have a blunt beneath that, which is very similar to a joint. The difference being that it's wrapped in tobacco leaves, or similar to a cigar. It's more like a cigar or a cigarello. Somebody may take a Black and Mild or a Swisher Sweet or other type of cigarello, empty out the tobacco completely, or just take out some of it, replace it with marijuana, roll it back up and smoke it that way. You also have the bong in the middle. Another way that most people are familiar with marijuana is placed in the, looking at that picture on that left-hand side, you see kind of that cone going in. It's placed, once it's ground up, the marijuana is placed in there, heated up with an open flame, and then it is inhaled through the top, which pulls the marijuana smoke down through the water. A lot of people think, oh, it filters all the bad things out. Definitely not the case. It does not filter it out. It may cool down the smoke a little bit, but it's not filtering out all the harmful components of marijuana. Then on the bottom right-hand side, you see a picture of edibles. And edibles are essentially marijuana that is baked into or cooked into foods that are edible. It could be sweet treats like candy bars or brownies, even gummy bears, certain things that may be very hard, if not impossible, to identify something that has marijuana and doesn't have marijuana just at first glance. You also have chips and butters and all types of things that are used um, as ingredients to make other types of edible marijuana foods. And the really scary part about these is the level of THC, which THC is the active component of marijuana that gives that high, is not always known, and it's not consistent throughout the food. You could have one brownie where the amount of THC could vary from one part of the brownie to another, just depending on how that is made. Also, if you have a batch of brownies, one batch could vary from the next batch of brownies, how strong and how potent that's really going to be, which is really scary. Also, when it comes to candies, young kids may not be able to identify the different candies and could mistakenly pop one of those gummy bears or a handful of gummy bears in their mouth, which could really have a detrimental impact on their health. Then on the top right-hand side of the screen there, you will see an e-cigarette and cannabis oil, or excuse me, cannabis e-liquid or marijuana liquid or e-chronic. There's a ton of different names for it out there. Essentially, it is marijuana, some type of liquid THC that's being included, used in an e-cigarette and used to get high in that manner. And what can be scary about this is we may not be able to smell it in the same way that you would a joint. A joint or a blunt, it's going to have a much stronger odor of marijuana associated with it than an e-cigarette will, because those are vapors where it's heated up, and then the liquid's heated up and then the vapors are inhaled. So it's a much weaker smell, but can still have very serious impact on a young person. So a couple different ways that marijuana is abused. You also have dabs, which is butane hash oil. Dabbing is pretty scary. Essentially, what someone does is they would take marijuana leaves and extract the THC from them using butane. And yes, butane being like what you think of in lighters, butane. So we'll extract the THC, and then from there, the oil will be attempted to get, they'll strain out the marijuana or like the thicker part of it, so it looks like a honey or a wax, which are a couple variations of the names. However, some of the chemicals transfer over from the butane into the butane hash oil or the dabs, amber, honey, wax, whatever you want to call it. And so scary that even people who are proponents of marijuana and marijuana legalization, you can see here, talk about how dangerous dabbing can really be. So what are the impacts on health? Well, marijuana does impact health in a number of ways. While people say it doesn't necessarily make that true. Proponents of marijuana and legalization throughout the years have always said it doesn't have any impact on your health because it's natural. Well, there's a lot of things that are natural that we don't want to inhale. When we go camping, we probably have a campfire a lot of times, but we don't stand over the campfire inhaling the wood that's being burned. It's natural, but we don't inhale it because we know that when things are burned, we know the carcinogens and how that can impact our lungs and a number of other parts of our body. Marijuana can impact the brain in a number of ways. It impairs short-term memory, increase of anxiety and paranoia, panic attacks, lack of coordination, to name a few. So it does have an impact on the brain. Do other chemicals have an impact on the brain too? Yes. And when it comes to young people, that's why we want young people to avoid using any type of substance, because it can have an even greater impact on their brain than it would even on an adult. So while marijuana can impact an adult with impaired short-term memory, anxiety, paranoia, panic attacks, lack of coordination, those risks are much greater when it comes to a young person because their brain still is developing. Taking a look at the heart, marijuana increases, when one smokes marijuana, increases the risk of heart attacks, can lead to irregular heartbeats, increased blood pressure, blood vessel constriction, and chest pains, which can also, going back to impact on the brain, if one is prone to anxiety or panic attacks, they're going to be much more likely, because of the physical impact that it's having on their heart, they're going to be much more likely to, it's going to be more likely to induce a panic attack because of that. Looking at the lungs. Oops, excuse me. Looks like we skipped. Okay, going back. Well, for some reason, it doesn't want to show our lung one here. But just really quick, we already talked about it. Smoking anything is going to impact the lungs. We know that. Even if it's being eaten as an edible, we know that it is going to harm other parts of the body. It's going to harm the heart. It's going to harm the brain, the mind, the developing body of a young person. We know no matter what method of abuse of marijuana, it is going to impact one or more parts of the body. Most likely, two or more key vital organs in the body will be impacted, no matter the method of abuse of marijuana. We hear this all the time. Marijuana is not addictive. That's just not true. Marijuana is addictive. 1 in 6 teens will become addicted to marijuana. That's what the statistics are telling us. And this is people who actually who have sought treatment or have been put in treatment. So if we don't know, if somebody's not coming forward and letting us know or doesn't go into some type of a treatment program for marijuana, we may not even know. So just from the people that are receiving some type of care relating to a marijuana dependency, we know that marijuana is addictive, and a dependency on this chemical is real. 29% of teens who are using marijuana. This is from the Monitoring the Futures study that's done by the University of Michigan. We crunched the data and we looked at it. 29% of teens using marijuana are also reporting other drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and meth. So if you're still not convinced on the impact of marijuana on the body and the impact of marijuana on the brain, and you want to ignore all those other facts, which are still facts, the fact that almost a third of kids who are using marijuana also report going on to use heroin, cocaine, meth, ecstasy, LSD, and a number of other illicit drugs, that's scary. And we know the seriousness of all those drugs. Those are accepted. People are still coming around to accept how serious marijuana is as a drug. So if you're still not there yet, but you're still at the point where you know heroin, cocaine, meth, ecstasy, and all these other drugs are bad and horrible for a young person, think about a third of kids that are using marijuana will use these substances. It's scary, no matter how you look at it. Okay, and now showing this one. I'm not sure why it's popping up down here. Having a few technical difficulties. All right, so we do know that marijuana is the #2 drug abused in Arizona by teens. For the first time, more kids are using marijuana than tobacco. And what's been happening with all the drug trends throughout the state relating to alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, prescription medications, most of the teen use trends have been going down. They've been going down. However, back in 2010, around the time that medicinal marijuana was voted on and approved in Arizona, is when we saw a shift. Everything is dropping, and then we see in 2010, marijuana does this, and it kind of flatlines. So while we see the access of marijuana decreasing and kids getting less marijuana from friends and family in different areas, we see an increase in the number of people getting marijuana, kids getting marijuana from medical marijuana card holders. So fewer kids were using marijuana. However, that gap is being filled up now because of greater access to the drug from people with a medical marijuana card. Youth using marijuana daily, and this doesn't mean every single day, but pretty much two out of 3 days, they're going to be using marijuana. They're 60% less likely to graduate. So a kid that's using marijuana pretty frequently, they're less likely to graduate, go on to college to obtain a college degree. And we know how important education is today for a young person, especially entering the workforce that they're going to be entering. And even if they don't go on to college, because we know now that not every every path is going to include a 4-year university for every person, and that's okay. We do know how important that high school education is. And the fact that 60% will be, that kids are 60% less likely to graduate when they're a regular marijuana user, that's alarming. And 14% of kids, high school teens in Arizona, say that they're getting their marijuana from someone with a medical marijuana card. So to think that just because it's not allowed for people that are that they're not allowed to have it because they don't have the card, so they obviously can't get their hands on it. We know when you increase access to any substance anywhere, it is going to impact the access that teens have to that substance as well. And this is just proof of it. Proof that marijuana is not continuing, marijuana use by teens is not declining as it was before, and that it's kind of flatlining, and more kids each year are getting their hands on marijuana from someone with a card holder. We can see very clearly that that policies do impact youth use of a substance. On the back of the medical marijuana card, which gives someone permission to get marijuana, it even says that it's harmful to your health. This is what I put up on the screen right here. This is the back of the Arizona medical marijuana card. It says possessing marijuana may be in violation of local, state, or federal laws. Possession of this card does not provide legal protection. Marijuana use can be addictive and can impair individuals' ability to drive a motor vehicle or operate heavy machinery. Marijuana smoke contains carcinogens and can lead to an increase of risk of severe health problems. This is from the Department of Health that is pretty much saying that marijuana is harmful and it's illegal. However, this card is still enabling people to get their hands on it. And this is because even though they're legally required to issue out the cards because of Prop 203 that came out in 2010, or that was voted on in 2010, I believe it was, this is their legal protection with the research that they've done. And this is a Department of Health who is not political at all. They are a department that is looking out for the health and well-being of the citizens of Arizona. So after their own research, this is their conclusion, that it's harmful to your health and that it's not good for you. So what can we do? Well, kids who talk to their parents about the dangers of drugs and alcohol are up to 50% less likely to use. So there is hope. There's definitely hope out there. Talking with young people does have an impact on the likelihood for them to use. What do we talk about? What do we say? Well, there's a number of things that we can say, but it's going to be difficult for me to get through all that right now because this is a quick half-hour webinar. So what I will do is at the end of the webinar, and we're going to keep going for a few more minutes and take some questions, but at the end of the webinar when I have a survey, everybody that takes that survey is going to get a link to the Marijuana Talk Kit, which is from the partnership for drug-free, the National Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. It's a great talk kit that includes some fantastic talking points about marijuana. This is that kit right there, and it helps parents answer some difficult questions. Here, one of them is, but you smoked weed when you were younger. You know, that's a difficult question for a lot of people to answer about any substance when talking with their kids. So how do you address that? How do you talk about that? How do you convey the fact that that it is legal in some states? So why would it be legal if it wasn't? If it was harmful, right? So this talk kit answers a number of questions and provides guidance to parents or caring adults on how to talk to young people about marijuana, because it is a serious issue and it's tough to talk about. But this kit provides parents and caring adults and educators with the guidance to do that in a way that will hopefully prevent their kids from engaging in reckless behavior. So the Marijuana Talk Kit, fantastic resource. But beyond that, helping build resilience. And that's by listening to teens, listening to young people when they have questions. When certain topics come up on the television or on radio, or they're talking about smoking weed or smoking pot, or they're joking about it on TV, use that as as an opportunity. Find out what your kids think about marijuana. Find out what their perceptions are relating to that drug. Because the more you listen to a young person, the more they're going to teach you about what they know, and the more they're going to teach you about their perceptions. And from there, you can really guide a discussion and have frequent conversations about drugs and alcohol. And I don't mean having a daily talk for an hour about the dangers of drugs and alcohol, but having regular short conversations about the dangers of certain substances is very important. Just the way that we want to reinforce other behaviors um, that we do want our kids to do, how we regularly encourage them to study, to complete their homework assignments, to participate in other things. This is something we should be talking about as well. Talking about drugs and alcohol, finding out what they know, answering their questions, utilizing that marijuana talk kit, and then coming up with a plan for your kid. If they do, if they have questions or they're concerned, like, well, what if I, somebody else is using it? How do I just say no to that? Or, well, it's not really that harmful. What do I do? I mean, I'm forced into these situations. Come up with a plan. Help your kid have a plan. And on our website at DrugFreeAZKids.org, you can find a number of tips on talking to your kid about any substances, talking points, helping them come up with that plan. All of these things and more you can find on our website at DrugFreeAZKids.org. A ton of different resources on our website, so please do check those out. Again, that marijuana talk kit, you got to read through it if you haven't already done so. At the end, take the survey, and I will send everybody who takes that survey a link to the webinar or to this webinar, as well as a link to the to download that talk kit. It's available in a PDF that you can print out. If you're a social worker, teacher, educator, and you want to print out more than one copy and provide those, you can also do that. Great resource from the partnership right there. We have some other webinars that will be up that are coming up. Getting Smarter with Study Drugs and Examining the Teen Brain will be our next two webinars that we have coming up. So I encourage you to check those out. What I'm going to do right now is I want to put up a survey. If you guys could take a few minutes to answer that survey, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps us learn more about what you want from a webinar, what we can do to change our webinars, what topics are important to you. And it lets our funders know that you guys really do value this free resource that we're able to provide. So while you guys are taking that, I want to use this as an opportunity to answer any questions you may have relating to marijuana, relating to talking to young people about marijuana. That chat box in the bottom left or right-hand corner of your screen is a place where you can type in any questions that you may have, or if you just want some clarification on something that I already talked about, because we do run through everything pretty quick. I will include a link to all the resources that I used in compiling the data in the webinar. I will send that out to everyone. These webinars are meant to kind of get your feet wet, so to speak, and then you can guide your own research and your further research in the direction that you want to go, because everybody's needs are a little different, and we recognize that. So rather than sitting here for 3 hours and talking about something, we'd rather hit the meat and potatoes of it in 30 minutes and then allow you to research further what you would like on that. Also, this webinar, along with all the other webinars that we've done in the past year, are archived on our website. So if you missed one of the past webinars that I mentioned earlier, feel free to check out our website, DrugFreeAZKids.org/webinars, and you can go on there to download, to view the recording of all those webinars. And the talk kit. The talk kit is free. Yes, talk kit is completely free of charge. And I will send that out to everybody afterwards, a link to that. It's a great resource from the partnership. But yes, 100% free. One of the many resources that are free from the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids, and one of that we'll link to on DrugFreeAZKids.org as well. So yes, we try to provide as many free resources as we can. A couple of other guides that we do have for free on our website is the intervention guide, or on our website and on the National Partnerships website is the intervention guide and treatment guide, which are great resources for anyone that is concerned about a young person who may already be using a substance and abusing it, and how to intervene and how to get them the help that they need, whether that is a guided a guided intervention within the family, or that's something um, a little bit more intense, maybe with treatment or bringing in outside help for an intervention. Ton of different resources in the intervention and treatment guides too. You can find links to those on our website as well at DrugFreeAZKids.org. Just click on the Get Help tab at the top and it'll show a bunch of different resources relating to that. Well, it looks like people are just about wrapped up on the survey. So I'm going to close out the survey in 5 seconds. So if you want to finish up um, your comments on the survey, that would be greatly appreciated. And I will be closing it out in 3, 2, 1, and 0. All right, that survey is now wrapped up. And I'm going to put my information up on the screen here. That's my email, justin.mcbride@drugfreeazkids.org, for those of you that are calling in. My phone number, 602-264-5700, extension 11. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about this or any other topics that we deal with at DrugFreeAZKids.org. And it looks like we do have a question. And it says, do you think the reason why youth access to marijuana from medical marijuana card holders is because the introduction of marijuana as legal as medicine is so new, and are we beginning to, as a learning curve? Just go seeing the part that I can. It's not showing me the whole question. But to answer that question, I think what's happening is the messages that we're sending about marijuana are very all over the place, for a lack of a better word. They're all over the place. We're sending out so many different messages relating to marijuana at the federal level, at the local level, um, relating to substances, and it's very confusing. We're saying that it's a medicine. However, we know that kids aren't stupid. Kids see the difference between a medicine that you go get at a pharmacy and a medicine that you're going to get at a marijuana shop, essentially. Kids recognize, like, oh, well, it's not, it's a medicine, but it's something that I can just use. It's not something that, I really need to go to the pharmacy for, that I need to go to my family doctor for, because the fact is, most people that are obtaining medicinal marijuana in Arizona are not going to their primary care physician, and they're not going to Walgreens to pick it up like they are any other medicine, because those medicines have been approved by the FDA, have gone through trials that tell us what the impact of marijuana really is on the long term and the short term. They're not regulated. So I think the issue relating to it being new is part of it. However, as access is increased to the substance, more kids will use. And that's proven for any substance. Whenever there is greater access to a substance, whether or not it's legal or illegal for them to use, more kids are going to be using and abusing the substance. That's just the facts. We saw that with synthetic drugs. When the policies changed and they got out of stores, even though they're still out there on the black market, less kids are using synthetic drugs. The numbers dropped almost overnight when we saw that. So yes, I think it being new is part of it. However, the increased access is always going to have an impact on kids' access as well. So that is a great question, though. This is something that policymakers, that educators, that families, that everybody needs to get a better handle on. We need to, as a society, because the side effects of all of these mixed messages are kids saying, well, nobody really knows what they're doing about marijuana from the state level, the federal level, the local level. Nobody gets it. So if nobody really has an understanding, you know what? It's not that bad. Might as well give it a try. It's not really going to impact me. When we get behind a cause, from a policy standpoint, from an education standpoint, from a family's talking standpoint, which is what happened with cigarettes and tobacco, we see how that can impact youth in a positive way, and how less kids are using tobacco now than ever before because of the policy changes and because of those conversations that kids are having at school with their peers, with their educators, with their families. It can really have a huge impact in a positive way on the health and futures of our young people. So if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I appreciate your time so much. I thank you for joining us during your lunch hour or whatever time it may be. If you would like to join us for a future webinar, be on the lookout for an invite or go register right now at DrugFreeAZKids.org/webinar. You all have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.